And now we're back. Okay.
Great.
Yeah.
So that experience was an eye-opener. It was really an eye-opener. And it was a pretty awful experience. And so, I mean, over the years, basically, this issue began to get bigger, with more challenges having to do with, especially the Dianic tradition, because we were known and are known as being female-centered, goddess-centered, and being for women only. So, you know, some of these individuals really thought they'd really make it as a woman if they got into a Dianic circle. That would be like some kind of confirmation on their gender identity. And it was never, again, it was never about their experience. I want to be really clear that, the experiences that I had are obviously not all trans people doing this, but they're awful quiet. If they're in agreement that, women should be able to have our own spaces, and there's times perhaps to come together, just like I've been a part of larger pagan gatherings, everybody's there. And then there are times for the mysteries that are different. And that different is not a bad thing. Different is what makes it rich, and we don't have to all think alike. And but the honoring of our physicality is very specific. That's not about identity. That is about embodiment, circling back.
Would you share with the people who may not know, the women's mysteries, the blood mysteries, and why this Dianic tradition is women only, and what that has to do with the blood mysteries?
Sure. The blood mysteries have to do, when we're talking blood, we're talking about the uterine blood mysteries, around menstruation and birth giving and menopause. I mean, there are traditions around the world that also honor sex-based differences with ritual, both for females and for males, of course. But in terms of the United States during that time period, it was not done. It just wasn't. And women carried all of this, again, shame and disgust, because the overculture taught us really well to be ashamed of our bodies, specifically our female body processes. And so part of the healing was about reclaiming those passages as sacred and creating rituals to honor ourselves as female beings. And this has been huge. I mean, the best that girls can get, because we share stories about our first menstruation, and I remember for many years the best experience that women often shared was that their mother said, well, beside it being secret for most of the women these young women from their families, because it was like, we don't talk about this. The best that they could hear was, well, it's no big deal. Don't worry, it's no big deal. And the message to a young woman then is, becoming a young woman, or becoming a woman now, is no big deal, because we internalize those messages. So what we did was change the message with ritual, so that a young girl could feel affirmed in her, her sexuality that was in the process of budding, teaching her about autonomy and self-love, mm-hmm. instead of self-hatred. The overculture is really good at teaching us to hate our bodies, to hate, and thus hate ourselves. And because then again, they got lots of things they can do to help us fix it. Lots of things to buy. And because if we're really happy with who we are and how we are, there's nothing to buy and there's nothing to sell. So there is that consumerism piece of it, for sure. And it's an epidemic, female self-hatred is an epidemic. But it's feels personal, but that's how you know it's institutionalized. Because if you have, 99.9% of women who grow up not finding themselves beautiful or powerful or all of these things, then it's something that's been institutionalized. It feels personal. We think it's just us, but it's not. That's why we call it patriarchy. And patriarchy.
That's a very good key.
And,
to understand that it's institutionalized. If you think it's just you,
it's not. So this kind of sensibility is dangerous to the status quo.
Yeah,
because it's not just you. It's not just personal. And
so
that I could say that for every person, male and female alike. We don't have to be like this thing they're promoting. And that goes into the gender identity issue, because the gender identity issue is saying, I feel like this, so I must be this other thing than who I am. And to me, it's totally disregarding the fact that gender characteristics are learned, propagated, taught to us, and that it's saying that each sex is not capable of having the traits that have been assigned to this body or this body. And I want to see liberation for everyone, to not be conforming to what we are being sold and the stereotypes of the dominant culture. So I want children to love the body they have and to be the child that they are, with accepting that you can be a male, a boy child, and if you want to wear a dress, freaking wear a dress. Let's make the world safe for this kid.
Yeah.
Let's make the world safe for everyone who doesn't conform to these ridiculous notions, which are stereotypes. Because if we didn't have that, there wouldn't be this industry. Follow the money, and drugging our children and sterilizing them. And, it's huge. It's a big business right now, big business. And no one talks about it. It's really...
Well, you sure did. You brought 48 voices. And then, what would you like to share with us about that process and how it was received or not received, and what backlash there was even in the pagan community? Can you share this?
Sure. I did something very unpopular, but that's also who I've always been. I had my training again early on because of about defending the right for women to gather before this ever happened. The transgender activism. So I was, just again, I wasn't changed. I'm doing the same work in the world that I've always done. And then all of a sudden I'm being targeted because of it, because I'm saying that sacred space for women is important, that women have a right to gather without the presence of a man who decides, has a feeling that he's now a woman. And just based on that, nothing else, you have to let him into your space. And it's like, hell no. It's just not going to happen. It doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. Do I have empathy, compassion for someone who doesn't feel right about themselves? Absolutely. I know what that feels like. Mm-hmm. I do. And almost every woman I've ever known knows that. So the trigger and the hook is, like, you should feel sorry for me, and therefore you should let me, have access to everything that you're doing. And it's not, I just know it's not about that. That's not to say, and I will always defend every group that's been marginalized around fair housing and work and all of those things, that No one should be oppressed because of who they are. I'm saying that what happened wasn't okay. What happened was they started telling me what a woman was. And their definition of a woman all of a sudden was supposed to be the definition of what a woman was created by males. And I'm hearkening back to, I go back to Genesis 2, in the Hebrew Bible, where God gives the power to name to Adam, and he gets to name woman and thus define her. And I wrote about that in Female Erasure as one of my contributions. And we've been here before. We've been here before historically, where males get to be the ones who define. This time, it's males who say they're women, and thus are redefining us in their image. And you get to be a male who identifies in a different way, and I want the world safe for a person like that. I really, but not to shut me down or say my entire life's work is irrelevant or transphobic or bigoted. It's really unfortunate that it didn't have to go in this direction. It really did not. And that's also why I had to respond with putting this book together. The pagan community, the larger pagan community, unfortunately, has been bullied into this, and I mean it quite literally, bullied into the shutting down of women's circles, not allowing them at festivals. I personally have been threatened, boycotted. I can't work even as a musician in those places any longer. I've been called a hater. I mean, horrific stuff. And it's like, and it's all about, there's no discussion. So the book was, for me, my way of saying, bring these voices that are different, that are not getting the attention, that are raising the questions, that are perhaps even screaming, stop, but not getting heard. I wanted a place for these voices to be able to be heard. And my intention completely was, can we read this and talk about these various issues? Can we talk about it? Because what's happened on the left, this is happening on the left, by the way, that the behavior is as fascistic as the far right, and they can't see they're doing the same thing as their complaints about the far right, and shutting people down who have a different point of view, and that is my biggest concern right now and going forward. We have to be able to entertain. We live in a pluralistic society. We have different, at least, I mean, I don't live in a country, at least I haven't until this happened to me, a country that wants to punish people. Punitive actions towards people who raise concerns, have questions, want to talk about it, are concerned about what's happening with the medicalization of children, the sterilization of children, the young people who are put in the transgender camp and given the hormone blockers as young kids and young teenagers, who are likely, at least according to studies, are young gay and lesbian people. And so there's a conformity happening. There's a homophobia going on. It's more acceptable to be trans than gay or lesbian. And people are just not talking about this. And I am alarmed. I am horrified. I'm alarmed. And I'm a lesbian. I work with women from all walks of life, many whom are very gender non-conforming. They don't present in a traditional feminine way. And they're having a harder time now because of this. They're being pressured to transition. Oh, you're just a butch woman who doesn't have the courage to trans. I mean, that is what they're being told. It's just, it's horrifying. So I am an Amazon for this. And I'm an Amazon for this because I can, because I'm clear about it, and I'm clear that I don't hate anyone. I'm here about justice, and I want a different world. I want a world where every child feels that they are loved and cherished and can express themselves any way they wish in the sacred body that they have. That's a transformation. That's about creating a non-patriarchal reality for our kids, and that's what I want. So I'm going to keep moving towards that vision, because I don't want to see our kids, our young people, being brainwashed in this way and doing irreparable harm to themselves through the drugs and the surgeries, and that is what's happening. And I don't understand why people are not up in arms about this more, especially when I think about the ecology movement that was going on. You know, people care about the environment. Watching people take these drugs, which do not have long-term studies on the effects, but there's, that's just, you should get out of the way and not talk about it because that's just someone's free will expression. But we have to be able to talk about these things. You know, why is it not okay to put nuclear waste into the ocean, but it's okay to chop off healthy body parts and take drugs for the rest of your life instead of changing the world? Make it safe for people who don't fit these arbitrary categories of gender. So that's why I have to keep going with this. And it's been really rough. It's been a huge personal cost to me in untold ways. And I've got to just keep going on. I don't know. I'm just keep going on here and hope to raise awareness.
What you're saying and about fascism, about the silencing of discussion, about freedom of speech. I mean, all of this is a direct threat to basic freedom, basic democracy. And it is happening on the left. The left media will not cover any of this. It's all just rosy-dozy. Let the child lead the way is the mantra. Let the child lead the way.
Right.
As if we're not the protectors of the children.
Right.
We know what the decision to take lifelong drugs to damage your endocrine system and we do know, even though the studies long-term studies haven't been made, we do know that puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones lead to increased heart attack, diabetes, bone density loss, brain development shifting,
right. It's that people are talking about this like, oh, isn't that nice? You changed your hair color.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it's like on that level of lightness. Oh, isn't, he now a pretty little girl? And literally, I've heard that said. And I'm horrified.
And Ruth,
but better that boy be a little girl than a sissy boy, fairy boy, gay man.
Or the one that's thrown at the parents, do you want a live daughter or a dead son?
Right, and that's the line. But they all, I know.
Yeah, all of that. And all of that can be found, the whole comprehensive view in terms of children, medicalization, of the queer theory that came in the 90s. That's the basis of this, of there's no such thing as a male or a female. Not only just not a man or woman, but there's no such thing as a male or a female, and biological sex is irrelevant to your gender identity. all of that is in your book,
Yes.
Female Erasure, and
Yes.
it's a tremendous, tremendous resource that is nowhere else to be found. And and as you're bringing through, I want to bring through again the threat to basic freedom, to the silencing of free speech, and then I feel like we're in the end game of patriarchy, which is the final destruction of the body, the final desecration of the human body. We're destroying the earth, or we're trying to. The ecological systems, the ocean, we're poisoning the ocean, and we're now going to, completely disconnect from the body and upload our consciousness into computers. This is where it's going. And this is not my idea. This is the transhumanists, their own statement that, this is where we're going and this is what needs to happen. And so it is totally counter to everything we hold sacred, to the reverence for life, this incredible gift of nature.
And the thing that, and I do need to say this, is that it's so counter to nature. It's counter to nature. And the reason that I'm more horrified about this being so widely accepted in the larger pagan community is because one of the contributions that the new pagan movement began doing was not only our connection to nature as human beings and how to live lightly on the earth, but also the reverence for our bodies, the reverence for our physicality, and restoring that notion of the sacred and embodiment. And this, it's like, where did that go? Where did that go in this? To oppose medicalization, like elective. I'm talking about elective medicalization of our children and young people. And that to me is really, I can't fathom it. I don't hear others speaking out about it. But to me, what is paganism then anymore? What is it? So I'm waiting for other pagan leaders to talk about this, and it's been a deafening silence.
Yeah.
So where is this all going? In terms of the women's spirituality movement, and how it's evolving. I hope that we can press a reset button. and I hope that through messages like this, and through the wisdom and what we learned during these early decades of women's spirituality, I'm hoping it will actually maybe trigger a yearning again and a questioning of what's happening now, to really, because we figured it out. I mean, this is the thing. Lear Keith wrote a great piece in the Female Erasure anthology, and I'm probably paraphrasing her, but I loved it. It struck me. She said, "We actually figured this. We figured it out. We figured out what was going on." And so I'm hoping that the young people coming up and their, the generations above them as well, will begin to remember some of this, about the sacredness inherent in our physicality, in the earth herself, and that it's about liberation from limitations of gender. Let's free ourselves. We figured this out. This is what we were doing. And we began to heal because of that. And we began to teach others how to do it. And I'm hoping that instead of taking a pill, taking a drug, chopping up body parts, which doesn't ultimately, work in the long haul, because it's about what's happening inside. Let's change the world. Let's bring holy back, to ourselves and to the earth, and and let's eradicate patriarchy from the face of the earth and all of the isms that are associated with it. That's where I'm still doing, because it's important. This is a backlash. This is a backlash that we're experiencing.
It's a
And if it's a
backlash.
backlash,
It's a backlash against having figured it out. We really were
yes,
figuring it out. And of
yes,
course, the
oh
backlash
yes,
came with a virulence and a perniciousness that has,
yes,
and convoluted,
yes,
twisted
yes,
Orwellian force that we've never
yes,
seen before.
yes. But that's because we figured it out, as you said.
And
That's right.
that's the hope right there. We figured it out. Now you are still, I want to ask you, what are you doing now to propagate female ritual spaces? Tell us about your ongoing work.
Well, I now live in the state of Michigan, and it took me a good bit of time to recover from the Female Erasure Project. I'm teaching locally. I'm doing talks at festivals. I'm recently in the last year, we've actually like at some of the women's festivals, we that which are not female only, by the way, anymore.
Yeah,
They've been eradicated. Um,
yeah.
we have been having a few places starting last summer, and we're hoping to do more this summer, is to actually have like a temple space. We set up a temple space with an altar and images from Max Dashu, some of her beautiful like vulva montages and breast pots, and some of the female figurines, and we set it all around the booth, and we had a space that we rented the booth not selling anything in it. It was just there for discussions, and we've had some fantastic discussions, and we haven't actually orchestrated the discussions. We've just put out like a thing in the front saying intergenerational radical feminist discussions here.
Oh, that's
and, And so we've had, we make the space so women know they have a safe space to talk about what's happening in the world. And so so that's part of it, making those spaces out there. And because Temple of Diana is a temple, and we have religious protection, we get to have it. We get to have our own events, like our Daughters of Diana gathering that we have every fall in California. I mean, it's like it's a church event. I don't usually use that word, but other people understand it when I use that word. And so our organization, which is a religion, is female centered and for women, as we define women, which is female embodied people, XX chromosomes. So that's what I'll continue doing. And I love to travel and teach women's ritual making. I'm in an interesting transition in my life around this. I'm doing my best to actually make space for fun and enjoying life, because if I don't do that, it's just depressing. So I'm just making it is. It's like, I still feel like I'm going to wake up from the number 45, who's in the White House, and it will not have happened. But here I am, and unfortunately he is. And I just hope we survive all of this. It certainly is my hope and my work going forward that we will survive this and create a better future for us all on the planet.
Well, the 45 fascism is a global phenomenon. It is increasing in Europe, around the world. Yeah. It is tied in with this denial of reality, this disrespect for nature, for the body, and for this narcissistic, because the queer ideology, which came in the 90s, emphasizes, as we know, individualism, and that they've lost sight of the common good, the community.
Right.
And so the responsibility to the larger context of life and humanity and the earth. And that's all part and parcel of fascism. And what's happening in the White House, the U.S. White House, is horrifying.
Yes.
And it's very lonely.
So fascism is happening on the right, it's happening on the left, and we need to accept and look for it in places that we do not expect it. Because yeah, I'm reading actually Madeleine Albright's book called Fascism. It's very good. And she is sounding, it's called Fascism, A Warning. And it's really well written. I recommend it. And it's talking about what's happening now in terms of fascism, the rise of fascism in the world.
And your work and the work of women's spirituality, women who are bringing through women's spirituality, is really the counterpoint to it all. I mean, yes. We understand this. We understand the absolute crucial importance of female embodiment and respecting the female. Yeah. And from there, everything unfolds out in an inclusiveness that is genuine and compassionate and creative and nurturing and real. Reality.
Real. Yes.
Ruth, have we covered everything? Is there anything you want to add to this?
We've covered a lot of things.
What would you say? I was going to say, what would you say to women? You know, what do you want to say to women and to men? Yeah. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Speak out, speak up. Really go through any fear you have about speaking up and speaking out when you hear something that it just is not sitting right, and support other points of view. When I've been the recipient of, suppression and censorship, it really has helped me have much more of an open mind. I'm not talking about hate speech, advocating violence against people. I'm not talking about that, because that is not okay. But sometimes, disagreement itself is not violence. Disagreement with another point of view is not hate speech. And we need to understand the nuances of these things, and to be willing to call it out when we experience it and when we see it. And, I've had to learn a lot about, okay, I really disagree with this person and they have a right to speak, and so do I. And so do I. So I've grown I've grown in a lot of ways from this experience. We must support free speech, because it's about the exchange of ideas, and it's about trying to get ourselves into a place of connection instead of disconnection. So it's about being brave and to nurture your relationships with in women's spaces, and try to have that in other ways. If it's outlawed in your state, because there are states in this country where you cannot meet with women only, and that is a nightmare. Do it in secret. We've been in secret before in other times and places over the ages, and we will do it in secret again if we have to. And I hope it won't ultimately come to that. But if it does, we'll survive it. We'll just meet in secret like we have in the past. Be brave. Be brave. And love the mother. And love the mother, and love women, and value yourself. Find your I. Find your I. Celebrate your I-ness.
Thank you, Ruth. Thank you for persevering. Nevertheless, she persisted, and you have. And it's also a part of the underbelly of women's internalizing patriarchy that aside from the queer ideology, trans ideology, that women do attack teachers, spiritual teachers, and it's something that most of the women I've spoken to who are teachers have experienced. and you have experienced it in spades in terms of speaking out to the whole world, not just the pagan community, but the whole world about the gender identity, war on women and the female sex. And so I encourage people to get the book and really give themselves an education, and also to get women's rights and see, especially your new edition that's coming out very soon of women's rights.
Yeah.
And educate themselves on really how fundamentally natural and beautiful this view of life is. Reverence for woman, reverence for the body, reverence for nature.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. It's been a pleasure getting agitated with you.
And I'll see you in October at Daughters of Diana. Thank goodness for the Temple of Diana, which is a really recognized female religion. Blessed be.
Thank you. Thank you. Blessed be.
Bye for now. Blessed be.
Bye. Blessed be.